Hi guys, welcome to tonight's deep dive into history's most unexpected life hacks. From portable ember bundles and smoke-dried hams to thorny living fences, herbal mattresses, and bark bread. We'll explore how medieval people survived without modern tech. Then we'll journey across empires to examine dangerous ancient beauty rituals, brain-stretching board games, and the stormy life of Mary Shelley, mother of science fiction. If that sounds intriguing, smash the like button, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Finally, drop a comment telling us the current time in your country. Let's see our global community light up. As you settle in after smashing that like button and letting the comments fill with time zone check-ins, picture yourself stepping outside your cottage on a damp, medieval morning. The hearth behind you is still glowing, but any warmth it offers will vanish the moment you close the door, unless you carry a fragment of that fire with you. That's why you reach for the small horn that always hangs by the lintel. Inside sits your lifeline, a smoldering coal wrapped in dry moss and linen, smeared with sheep tallow. It's warm to the touch, aromatic in a barnyard sort of way, and absolutely essential. Without it, you're one rain shower away from a very cold, very dark night. You don't think of this ember bundle as technology, but it is. In a world without matches, Bic lighters, or even reliable flint and steel, fire is more valuable than coin. You can't just waltz into the woods, strike two rocks together, and expect sparks to leap onto damp tinder. You need a living fire, one that sleeps but never dies, one that can be coaxed awake with a little breath and patience. That's what the bundle gives you. Portable potential, politely smoldering in your pocket like a medieval power bank. The ritual of making it is simple, almost meditative. Before dawn, you rake through the ash-gray coals of the hearth and find a walnut-sized piece glowing cherry red at its core. You nestle it into a cushion of crumbled fungus or punkwood, materials chosen because they char slowly rather than burst into flame. Around that, you wrap a layer of dried moss, the same moss you collected in the forest and hung in the rafters all spring, precisely for this purpose. Next comes a square of linen steeped in saltpeter and animal fat. The saltpeter encourages a gentle burn. The fat seals in heat and moisture. Finally, the whole parcel slides into a hollowed cattle horn, capped with a wooden plug bored with a pinhole so the ember can breathe. The bundle is warm, yes, but it won't ignite the horn unless you're careless. Tucked into your satchel, it will ride all day, through drizzle, wind, and the jostle of cartwheels, waiting for the moment you need it. Imagine noon finds you far from home, stomach rumbling. You gather sticks, build a teepee of kindling, and pull out the horn. The ember inside has faded to a dull black, but that's the beauty of coals. They look dead long before they're truly cold. You tip the bundle into your palm, expose it to air, and give it a few quick puffs. At first, nothing happens. Then a faint red pulse blossoms through the charcoal like a heartbeat. You nestle it into a bird's nest of dry grass, lift the nest to your lips, and blow until the grass ignites. In under a minute, you have flame. No frantic sparking, no chapped knuckles from flint strikes. Just steady fire born from the hearth you left hours ago. The convenience borders on miraculous, but it also underpins an entire social fabric. Because you carry fire, you can share fire. If a neighbor's hearth goes cold during a storm, you can hand over your bundle like a favor and a blessing. They'll return it later with thanks and maybe a slice of smoked bacon. In a time when hospitality is survival, the ability to pass literal warmth from hand to hand binds a village tighter than any church sermon. There's strategy in it, too. You've learned to pack more than one ember on journeys longer than a day. One rides in the horn. Another smolders in a clay pot wrapped in damp burlap so it cools slowly and lasts through the night. Experienced travelers even stage embers, leaving a bundle hidden under a stone near a favorite campsite, knowing they'll find ready coals on the return trip. It's communal caching before GPS, and it turns wild landscapes into a network of invisible hearths. Of course, the practice isn't without risk. A careless traveler might drop a bundle onto dry leaves and start a brush fire. A child might prise open the horn and burn curious fingers. That's why you were taught ember etiquette as soon as you could walk. Never set the horn down on straw. Never sleep with it wedged beside a hay-filled mattress. Never open it indoors unless the hearthstones are swept clean. The rules sound fussy until you witness a thatched roof go up like a torch. One ember can light your soup or end your life. Respect is non-negotiable. Fire politics even shape trade. Charcoal burners in misted woodlands time their kiln cycles to supply embers to market towns on fair days. They sell glowing coals nestled in clay mugs stoppered with clay plugs. Ready-made bundles for city folk who lack hearths but need portable flame for roadside cooking. Minstrels buy them to light rushlights during twilight performances. Smiths stash them to spark forges at dawn. An entire microeconomy flickers in step with those tiny red hearts. And yet, despite the complexity, the ember bundle remains profoundly personal. When you craft one, you're capturing a piece of home. The coal comes from last night's fire, the same fire that warmed your children and cooked your supper. When you breathe life back into it miles away, you feel tethered to your hearth across space and time. It's comfort you can hold in one hand, hope you can feed with nothing but breath. Fast forward to tonight, when you finally trudge back through the cottage door. Rain has soaked your cloak, but your horn is dry. You place the bundle on the hearthstone, tease it open, and add straw. Flame springs up, then wood catches, and soon the familiar orange glow fills the room. You made it home, and so did your fire. Tomorrow, you'll build a new bundle, repeating the cycle that connects sunrise departures to hearthside returns and binds one generation to the next. So when you hear modern campers brag about waterproof matches or plasma lighters, remember that your medieval counterpart solved the same problem with moss, fat, and ingenuity. They didn't just survive without modern tech, they engineered a pocket-sized covenant with fire itself. And now that you know the craft, you could too, should the lights ever go out and the world demand the oldest kind of resilience. The moment your new fire settles into a bright, steady glow, a familiar scent curls through the cottage. Sweet, resin-tinged smoke mixed with the faint tang of salt. You tilt your head back and high above the rafters, glimpse rows of dusky shapes hanging just beyond the rising heat. Those are your private stores, slabs of pork shoulder, strings of trout, and a hard-won quarter of venison, all quietly changing color in the whisper-thin haze that drifts behind the hearthstone draft. Out on the road, you carried fire in your pocket. At home, you teach fire to do slow, invisible work, turning fresh meat into insurance against the lean weeks ahead. It starts hours before you ever lift a cleaver. While the morning embers still pulse red, you rake them forward and build a new fuel bed of split alder and pine cones. The goal isn't flamboyant flame, too hot, and you'll cook the meat instead of preserving it. You want a muted, almost sullen smolder, thick on aroma, but stingy on heat. Once the fire steadies, you nudge a flat river stone upright at the back edge of the hearth. That stone is more than a barrier. It's your smoke baffle, forcing most of the fumes to bend, cool, and creep into the pocket of air that hugs the rafters. Up there, away from direct flame, the temperature rarely tops a balmy 90 degrees F, perfect for coaxing moisture out of flesh without sealing bacteria inside. You've already prepared the cuts the night before, rubbed them with coarse salt and wild juniper crushed in the mortar, then patted them dry so the crystals can draw out excess water. The trout received a gentler treatment, a bath of brine laced with cider vinegar, bay, and a whisper of honey robbed from your own hives. Each piece now wears a tacky sheen, the telltale pellicle that helps smoke cling like morning mist on wool. When the fire and the meat are both ready, you climb the stool, loop hemp twine through drilled joists, and suspend the bounty in staggered rows. The first minutes feel anticlimactic. Nothing seems to happen except an extra swirl of haze near the ceiling. But by dusk, the surfaces take on a bronze blush, and the cottage smells less like a cook fire and more like a forest camp where someone spilled molasses on cedar chips. You never announce these hanging treasures to visitors. Even friends who sit by your hearth rarely crane their necks high enough to notice the silhouettes. That discretion is half the method's genius. Anyone breaking in at night would grope low for iron pots or scour the larder shelves. Few would think to rob the ceiling. And if they did look up, they'd catch only shadow against smoke-blackened thatch. The practice is as much about camouflage as chemistry. Each evening, you tend the fuel the way a vintner babysits barrels. If rain threatens, you switch to well-seasoned oak so the smoke stays dry. Should you need extra warmth for the children's bath, you add spruce and open the baffle a hair, letting more heat rise without turning the meat leathery. A balance emerges. Hearth chores below, quiet curing above, both fed by the same modest flame. Over 2 weeks, the pork loses nearly a third of its weight as water drips out, hisses on the stones, and vanishes in the draft. The trout tighten and darken, turning glossy as varnished driftwood. By the time the venison develops its peppered crust, you can tap it with a fingernail and hear a faint, satisfying knock. None of this is gourmet posturing. It's survival engineering. Winter shutters the market road under snowpack, and wild boar migrate downslope, leaving snares empty. But you can still slice a shard of smoked ham into cabbage soup and taste autumn's last abundance. Travelers barter silver pennies for a ribbon of your fish because it keeps in a saddlebag for a fortnight. Even the scraps matter. Shavings simmered in porridge give children protein when the hens pause their laying. Your neighbors practice variations on the same theme. Old Marta next door strings goose breasts near her chimney, but adds dried nettle to the fire, so the smoke carries a mineral bite she swears repels moth larvae. The miller's wife cold smokes eels inside a clay outbuilding whose vent pipe snakes underground to chill the fumes before they touch flesh. Techniques differ, yet everyone agrees on the 3 unbreakable rules. Keep air moving, keep heat low, and keep your mouth shut about how much you've got stored. The social contract extends beyond secrecy. When a mare foals early and Yorick is trapped in the stable for 2 nights, you send your eldest with a linen-wrapped wedge of venison to fortify him. He repays the kindness midwinter with a sack of cracked barley. Smoke-hardened meat becomes a currency more stable than coin, immune to rust, nearly immune to timkenyo, and flavored with mutual trust. There's science at play, though no one calls it that. The phenols in hardwood smoke bond to the meat's surface, creating an acidic film hostile to bacteria. Salt lowers water activity, denying microbes the moisture they need to multiply. Cool airflow completes a trifecta of preservation that modern labs would validate with microscopes. But you rely on taste, smell, and your grandmother's caution. If a slab feels tacky instead of dry, back up it goes for another day. If a trout smells more like pond than pine pitch, you feed it to the pigs. Waste hurts, but sickness hurts worse. Months later, when snow presses against shutter seams and night falls before supper, You'll lower a ham, slice it paper thin, and sear those sheets in a pan with onion. The flesh will curl and redden, releasing fat that once would have spoiled in a week. Now it crackles like it's telling its own success story. You'll serve it with black bread while the little ones gnaw the crisp rind and marvel that something hanging in plain sight for half a season could taste so alive. As you chew, you'll glance at the beams above the fire pit, empty for the moment, and feel the urge to start the cycle again. Because you know spring will bring piglets and running rivers thick with fish, but autumn always trails behind, ready to test how wisely you managed the glow of a hearth and the patience of smoke. The lesson is simple: carry fire wherever you roam, and when you come home, make that fire carry you through the hungry months. You step out of the cottage at dawn, breath fogging in the cool air that drifts above the still smoldering hearth. Behind you, the hidden hams and bronzed trout sway in gentle currents of smoke, doing their slow chemistry overhead. Ahead lies another project that began for the same reason your meat went skyward: survival multiplied by patience. Bordering the small pasture is a snarling chest-high wall that isn't stone or plank at all, but alive. An interlaced barricade of willow, hawthorn, and hazel that you've been training for years to grow sideways instead of up. Where a wooden fence would already be graying or rotting, this green bulwark is thickening season after season. You can feel its vigor when you press a palm against the rough bark. Sap surges under the surface like blood under skin. Last night's rain still beads on the leaves, turning each thorn into a glassy spear. The livestock know better than to challenge it. Even a stubborn ram will bounce off the mesh of living wood. That means less time mending rails and more time tending the slow alchemy behind the hearth. Your grandfather taught you the first step on a wet spring day: planting whips, the long, pliant saplings, barely thicker than quills, in a zigzag trench. He called them babies you'd bend but never break, because the trick was to slice halfway through each trunk, tilt it forward, and weave it into its neighbor. The partial cut, laying, kept the cambium intact so the saplings stayed alive, sprouting vertical shoots even as the original stem now ran horizontal like a spine. Over the months, each laid stem threw up new wands, and you repeated the ritual: slice, tip, weave, until a lattice emerged dense enough to halt a dog and high enough to daunt a thief. The rhythm of the work mirrors the patience of smoking meat. In both crafts, you coax nature to your will without fully conquering it. You don't fight the tree's urge to grow, you redirect it. You don't drown the meat in flames, you whisper smoke across it. Both labors reward you not with instant gratification, but with security weeks or years later, when wolves skirt the boundary looking for lamb, or a February blizzard leaves every other larder in the valley bare. Inside the hedge, the microclimate changes subtly. In summer, wind that would desiccate your vegetable rows slows to a sigh, and dew lingers longer on the beans. In winter, drifting snow piles against the outer wall, insulating the field like a wool blanket. The hedge's hungry roots also knit the soil, catching top-layer loam before rain can wash it downstream. That means richer earth for next year's cabbage and onions, key companions to smoked pork in the stew pot. Everything interlocks. Fence protects animals. Animals fertilize ground. Ground feeds crops. Crops flavor meat. Meat sustains you while you weave more fence. Neighbors measure wealth in acreage or livestock, but you've learned to count in cubits of hedge. A gapless cordon around 4 acres means escape-proof cattle and grain untrampled by hooves. It means privacy, too. Outsiders can't peer through knotted stems to see how many sides of venison you've got hanging, or whether your turnips failed. Privacy in lean times is its own currency, one you spend sparingly by revealing stores only to friends who barter honestly. The living wall carries a language of its own. Buds that flush reddish mean the willow is healthy. A sudden browning might signal disease creeping up the row. You patrol at dusk, pruning rogue shoots and tucking fresh growth into the braid like a mother plaiting hair. The smell is a mix of green sap and distant hearth smoke, a reminder that safety is layered, never singular. Fire in your pocket, fire in your rafters, and a forest's worth of thorn on the boundary. That's your insurance portfolio. Occasionally, the hedge gives more than defense. In May, you gather sprigs of hawthorn blossom for mead flavoring. In September, clusters of hazelnuts hide among the leaves, protein-rich snacks you shell by lamplight while the kids recite rhymes. Even the trimmings have purpose. Straight willow rods become basket ribs. Thin twigs feed the morning blaze that starts the smoke cycle anew. The boundary is not a line, but a circulatory system, sending resources inward even as it keeps threats out. Travelers passing on the distant cart road rarely grasp the hedge's sophistication. They see a tangle, perhaps charming, perhaps intimidating, but hardly the medieval equivalent of a high-tech perimeter alarm. You, however, know the hours baked into every interwoven branch. Each slash of the billhook, each careful bend, is archived in the timber like tree rings recording seasons. When the moonlight silvers the thorns, you can trace the chronology of your own labor. Year 1, when you first laid the center stretch. Year 2, the big windstorm that snapped 3 stakes. Year 5, when the outer row finally closed like sutured skin. There's a communal dimension, too. Twice a year, you and the neighboring farms share a hedge-laying bee, trading stories, cider, and muscle. The work crew crawls along the boundary like patient surgeons, stitching gaps, sharpening stakes, and arguing about whose section is thickest. Techniques differ. Some favor the pleach method, some the Midland bullheaded style. But the goal is one continuous fortress spanning the hamlet. When dusk falls and lanterns wink among the thorns, you stand back to admire a defense line grown from the earth rather than nailed onto it. Wildlife thrives in the braided thicket. Wrens nest in the crooks, hedgehogs burrow at the base, and pollinating insects hum along the blossoms. Their presence is more than pastoral charm. It's biological pest control for your cabbage patch and orchard. The living fence, by design, refuses to be a monoculture. Diversity makes it stronger, just as smoke layers flavors because alder, oak, and apple each lend different tannins to the curing meat. What began as a frontier between yours and theirs evolves into an ecosystem that ignores boundaries altogether. Roots drink from the same groundwater as the trees beyond. Birds hop freely over the line, and vines creep both directions. That paradox teaches humility. You can guide nature, but you never truly own it. The best you can do is broker a truce, thorn for protection, blossom for sustenance, shade for comfort. Late autumn brings a final ritual. You walk the length of the hedge with a lantern, checking for holes before the first snow. Any daylight peeking through is plugged with fresh cuttings. You press your ear to the branches and hear the wind buffeted into a low murmur rather than a howl. Satisfied, you head inside where the cured venison waits for its turn in the stew. Tomorrow's fire will be lit with twigs trimmed from the very wall that guards your quiet. Circle, complete. In a world where everything perishable needed looking after, embers, meat, even reputation, a living fence offers a rare promise of getting stronger on its own. Each spring it thickens. Each winter it stands firmer against storms. Each decade it outlives another wooden gate that collapses elsewhere. And long after you're gone, the hedge will remain, swallowing your billhook cuts in fresh bark, a testament that survival is as much about growing wisely as it is about building or burning. You slide the gate stake home and follow the hedge toward the kitchen garden, boots hushed by dew. Yesterday's woven hawthorn still bristles behind you, but your mind turns from thorn to clay. If that living fence is a shield, clay is the silent partner inside it, humble, abundant, yet capable of trapping both warmth and cold like treasure. You kneel where turnip leaves sparkle and pinch the soil. Beneath the loam lies a red seam waiting to be coaxed into any shape you require. One such shape already rests on the hearthstone, warm from last night's venison stew. You lift the pot and feel heat pulsing through its walls long after the embers died, proof that baked earth remembers fire. Later, when the vessel cools in the cellar, it will cradle milk against the fiercest noon sun just as faithfully. Neighbors call these jars earth batteries, half jest, half blessing, because clay stretches the life of food the way smoke stretches meat. Your mother taught you the craft. It begins with patience. Quarry clay from the stream bank, soak, slake, sieve, then wedge the yielding mass until it feels like bread dough. Ground shards from broken pots, grog, are folded in so finished ware shrugs at sudden shifts of heat. Coil by coil, you raise the walls, smoothing each lift with a damp thumb until no joint shows. Before the form stiffens, you burnish it, rubbing a river pebble in tight spirals until the surface gleams like polished leather and begins to close its pores. Nature's own non-stick finish. Firing follows. Green vessels nestle on straw in a shallow pit, roofed with spent shards, heaped with scrap wood, and sparked alive. Flames roar, then settle to coals as ash drifts down like gray snow, slowing the cool so walls will not fracture. At dawn, you lift pots the color of sunrise, rose, umber, sometimes mottled where smoke kissed the clay. A tap on the rim gives a low, confident ring, tuned for everyday endurance rather than courtly show. That endurance feeds threshers today. Before first light, you packed the burnished cauldron with venison, barley, onions, rosemary, and a handful of hedgeberries, letting the stew thicken while 3 clay spheres, simple balls shaped from leftover clay, baked among the coals. When the broth grew rich, you slipped the glowing spheres inside, clamped the lid, wrapped the pot in wool, and stowed it in a wicker hamper. Those spheres now radiate like captive suns, keeping supper hot without an open flame and without the drifting scent that might lure scavengers. Warmth seeps through the wicker as you walk the lane, hedge to your left, orchard to your right, cottage smoke a faint ribbon behind. In the far field flails drum grain into golden dust. You set the pot on a stump, lift the lid, and a cloud of thyme-scented steam rolls out. Bowls appear, spoons follow, and portions slide free. The polished interior is so slick, no scrap clings. Cleaning later will need only creek water and a twist of straw, no sand, no iron scraper. No wasted effort. While the workers eat, you reveal the pot's second trick. You pluck a still hot sphere, wipe it clean, drop it into a jug of cider, and seal the mouth with waxed linen. By sunset, the drink will be gently mulled. Stone that stores summer, a thresher laughs, weighing another sphere in his palm. You nod, thinking of the ember bundle tucked in your satchel. Fire in moss, fire in clay. Portable power dressed in different clothes. Clay keeps serving when winter sharpens its teeth. You heat bricks in the hearth, wrap them in cloth, and slide them under straw mattresses. They leak warmth until dawn and chase frost from aching joints. In July, you reverse the spell. Soak a porous jar, set it in a breeze, and evaporative cooling chills the water inside. One substance, two opposite miracles, mastered through observation rather than parchment formulas. The pot's interior grows better with time. Each stew leaves a whisper of fat that polymerizes, darkening the bowl to a coffee-rich patina and sealing microscopic pores tighter still. Soon the surface rivals the slickest modern pan, yet nothing peels away and flavors remain pure. You smile, half amused, half proud, knowing future cooks will chase synthetic coatings while a stone and a patient hand already solve the problem. Back home, after the field meal, the bowls await washing. You pour creek water into the cauldron, swirl, and watch residue lift like mist. Even the rinse has value. You throw it onto the compost where barley husks and hedge trimmings ferment into next spring's soil. Then you refill the pot, set it beside the hearth to boil clean, and prepare an herbal tonic in a smaller burnished bowl. Marigold for infection, comfrey for bruises. The bowl's thick walls hold the infusion warm while medicine draws out, and your youngest, sitting in the doorway, twisting willow rods for tomorrow's fence repair, accepts the steaming cup with a grin. Even broken shards live on. Chips from cracked lids become feet for new pots. Powdered failures mix with lime to seal gaps between hearthstones, adding mass that banks evening heat. The floor itself is pounded clay, collecting warmth by day and surrendering it after sunset when drafts snake under the door. Nothing truly leaves the cycle. Every fragment returns wearing a different badge. Twilight settles. You stack finished vessels on a beam beneath rafters where smoked trout and ham glimmer bronze. Fire's breath guards meat above, while Earth's body cradles tomorrow's meals below. An elegant harmony of elements inside one cottage heartbeat. Outside, the hedge darkens into silhouette, proof that protection can thicken with every season. Inside, the clay pot on the hearthstone hums with stored heat, a quiet promise that you will wake to warm porridge even if night winds snuff the coals. You bank the embers, bar the door, and let the house breathe in gentle, radiant silence. At first light, a hush settles over the cottage, thicker than sleep itself. When you unlatch the door, the world beyond is no longer the familiar mosaic of hedge, orchard, and footpath. It is a pale sea of cloud pressed low enough to wet your lashes. Clay still radiates quietly on the hearth behind you, but vision fails the moment you step outside. No horizon, no tree line, only a billowing white that swallows depth and distance alike. Fog like this turns every traveler into a blind sailor, and the only compass you trust now is sound. You pause at the gatepost and wait for the first cue, a single, slow peal of the church bell in the valley. Its tone slides through the mist like an oar through water, muffled yet unmistakable. The note tells you more than location. The way it decays reveals air's thickness, hinting at whether the fog will lift by noon or clamp down until dusk. One strike, two heartbeats of silence, then a faint echo rebounding off the distant limestone ridge. There lies your western boundary, invisible, but sung into certainty. Before you move, you listen again. To the south, the miller's wind harp whispers a three-note sigh each time a breeze threads its wooden slats. You helped install that harp last spring, lashing it high on an oak so sound would carry above the wheat. In clear weather, its voice blends with birdsong, but in this cottony hush, it becomes a luminous thread pulling you toward safe ground. You step forward, measuring strides against the harp's faint cadence, letting rhythm stand in for sight. Every few dozen paces you click tongue against teeth, sharp, percussive, and gauge the echo. Over plowed fields, the reply is soft and quick. Near stone walls, it returns brighter, delayed. When the echo vanishes altogether, you know you have reached open marshland, where fog sits thickest and sound is swallowed. There you slow, plant your staff, and search for the rain gutter's drip you installed on a lone willow, water hitting a hollow gourd 10 times a minute, a liquid metronome guiding feet past the mud. The method is as old as the paths themselves. Long before hedges rose or clay pots glowed, traders followed ringing bowls, wooden clappers, and goat horn trumpets hung at crossroads. Families living near cliffs banged iron skillets at dawn, so shepherds on the high pasture could triangulate home. You grew up mapping these tones the way city children memorize street names. Each has its register, its habitual interval, its personality. The bell is solemn and paternal, the wind harp playful, the gourd drum practical, plodding. Together, they sketch a sonic topography far more detailed than any parchment. As the path inclines, fog thins just enough to reveal silhouettes of the living fence, its thorny ridgeline lofting into view like a phantom rampart. You know this section by ear, too. When wind rubs through hawthorn, it produces a dry rattle distinct from the willow's soft hiss. In winter, that music dulls, but today, new leaves flick and shiver, adding high notes that flutter above the deeper hum of mist. You trail fingertips along wet bark, confirming orientation even as visibility falters again. Half a mile on, another cue emerges. Twin stones you stacked into an arch carry a hollowed branch that whistles whenever gusts squeeze through the gap. The pitch dips if the branch swells with moisture, rises when sun dries it. Right now, it sings a mid-range D, telling you humidity still clings. Beneath the arch, you stamp your heel twice. The ground replies with a drum-like thud, packed yet forgiving, signaling the buried clay drainpipe that keeps the footpath from bogging. You reshuffle the mental map. Bell behind, harp southwest, whistle northeast. Without needing sight, you could sketch your position within the hedged domain to an arm's breadth. Fog complicates more than travel. It masks predators and confuses livestock. You quicken pace toward the sheepfold, ears pricked for trouble. Instead, you catch a distant clangor. 2 ladles knocked together in 3 quick taps. Your neighbors' agreed-upon code for all well. Community here speaks in metal and wood as much as in words. The shepherd likewise carries a conch shell. 1 sustained blast means a stray ewe. 3 staggered blasts, a wolf sighting. Today, you hear none and breathe easier. The sheep themselves add to the score. Their bleats bounce off invisible curtains of moisture, arriving warped. The closer you stand, the sharper the consonant edge of each call. By judging those textures, you can count the flock without laying eyes on a single fleece. This morning's tally matches last night's penning. Satisfied, you scrape lichen from the drinking trough, a chore better handled now than in open sky heat. Returning home is simpler. You carry a pocket bell of your own, a thumb-sized bronze cone strung on flax cord. Every 20 steps, you give it a flick. The pitch is high, childlike, meant to pierce personal fog, yet remain distinct from the valley bell. When its ring rebounds off the orchard's outer wall, you adjust course a hair eastward. When the note feels swallowed, you know Hedgerow absorbs the vibrations, signaling you've veered too far. The bell becomes a dialogue between you and the land, each ring a question, each echo an answer. Near the cottage, the clay roof tiles drip, each drop landing on an upturned bucket placed for this very reason. Pings on metal lids form a dotted rhythm you've come to associate with home, the way sailors love a lighthouse horn. At last, the wooden planks of the porch croak underfoot. announcing arrival even before you open the door. Inside, heat greets you, stored in the same fired earth that sent you out, and the day's first clear shape emerges as fog stays politely outdoors. Later, over bowls of porridge still warm from last night's clay-banked fire, you teach the younger ones the morning score. You hum the valley bell's note and tap the ladle 3 times. They mimic, then giggle, then grow serious as they realize fog listening is as vital a skill as hedge weaving or ember wrapping. You send them to the doorway, eyes closed, to identify which side the garden sparrows chatter from. They misguess at first, but with practice discern echo from original, distance from direction, until soundscape replaces missing sight. Fog eventually lifts, revealing ordinary lines of field and fence, but the invisible map lingers in memory. You know you could walk these routes in perfect darkness now, guided by bell and breeze, by water's drip and thorns whisper. Survival here does not rely on a single sense. It braids them all into a resilient cord. Fire warms, clay preserves, smoke protects, hedge defends. And when the world erases itself in a rolling shroud, sound carries you unerringly back along the braided path. You finish the last spoonful of steaming porridge and feel the fog's chill finally loosen its grip on your bones. The clay pot on the hearth still hums with yesterday's stored heat, but another ritual now takes precedence, one as old as the ember bundle and as necessary as the hedge, tending the health of your own mouth. You reach for the lidded ash box on the mantel, its wooden sides smooth from countless handlings. Inside waits a mixture you crafted at the full moon. Charcoal ground as fine as river silt, coarse gray salt from the coast 2 valleys south, and a sachet of herbs dried in the rafters above the slow-smoked hams. The blend looks humble, dull as stove ash, gritty as sand, but you know it wields quiet power. Charcoal born from your own hearth once crackled as split birch, sucked the night's cold into flame, and finally collapsed into porous black embers. When quenched and pulverized, those same embers become a million tiny sponges, eager to absorb odor and stain. Salt does its part too, scouring plaque and drawing moisture from lurking bacteria. Pulverized sage and mint lend a green fragrance that turns an otherwise gritty chore into a bright beginning. You tilt a pinch into your palm and add a drip of well water until the powder darkens into a thin paste. No bristled brush is required. A freshly cut birch twig, chewed until its fibers fray like a tiny mop, serves just as well. You work the twig between teeth, feeling charcoal's feather-light grit polish enamel while salt needles the gums in a pleasant sting. The motion is deliberate, almost meditative. Circles along the molars where barley husks hide, gentle scrubs across incisors stained by last night's mead. Each pass reminds you that survival isn't only about keeping wolves from the sheep or warmth in the stew, but about maintaining the one tool you carry everywhere, your body. A faint echo of church bell drifts through the open door, the same bell that guided you through the fog. You marvel that charcoal, bell metal, and fired clay all spring from a single mastery of elements. Fire gives you the ember to light kindling in a squall, smoke to preserve meat, heat to harden pottery, and now powder to defend your smile. You rinse with water cooled in an unglazed jar. Evaporative chill makes the swallow startling, a brisk reminder that clay can take as well as give. The children line up next, each with a twig nub and a grin wide enough to reveal yesterday's berry skins lodged between teeth. You parcel out the dark paste like a rare confection. They giggle at the color, lips smudged pirate black, before scrubbing with surprising diligence. You don't lecture them about cavities or gum rot. They have seen neighbors whose neglected teeth turned every meal into agony. Experience does the teaching. When they spit into the herb patch, charcoal flecks vanish into soil, recycling potassium and phosphorus back to the plants that will season next season's stews. Nothing wasted. Outside, fog thins, revealing the living hedge in patchy silhouette. You catch the subtle camaraderie between thorn and charcoal. One keeps danger at bay, the other keeps decay at bay. Both require patience. Charcoal suitable for tooth powder can't come from a quick blaze. It demands a slow, low burn inside a covered pit so volatile oils escape without igniting. You recall last month's charcoal firing, stacking willow sticks upright in the earth kiln, sealing the pyramid with turf, letting it smolder for days. When the mound cooled and you broke it open, the sticks had transformed into lightweight, glassy rods you crushed with a mallet. A sigh escaped your lips at the sight, a craftsman's relief when material emerges exactly as intended. Sage and mint came later, hung in loose bundles above the curing meat where smoke deterred insects. As they dried, their oils concentrated. You crumbled the leaves between fingers, releasing a scent sharp enough to cut through autumn damp. Combined with salt pounded in a mortar of riverstone, the mixture became more than the sum of its parts, an alchemy of protection you can taste. You teach the children subtle tricks. If gums bleed, add yarrow. If breath sours after garlic, chew a fennel seed. They absorb the lore as naturally as the rhythm of the hedge-laying bee or the sequences of bell calls in fog. One day, they'll pass the knowledge forward, and perhaps charcoal from this very hearth will polish the teeth of grandchildren you'll never meet. When morning chores call, you stow the ash box, but the ritual leaves its afterglow, mouth tingling, breath fresh, a quiet confidence blooming behind every word you'll speak today. Conversations with traders at the market will open with smiles unshadowed by rot. Songs shared at evening gatherings will lift on clean breath. Even a shouted warning across fields will carry further when not muffled by aching gums. Oral health here is not vanity. It is social currency and tactical advantage. You shoulder the satchel containing a fresh ember bundle, always prepared, and step onto the lane. The sun finally slices through ragged shreds of mist, sparkles off the brook, and illuminates the hedge's dew-studded thorns like rows of glass needles. A breeze brings the faint scent of mint from your breath, mingled with the earthy perfume of damp soil. Everything connects. The boiled water poured into the clay cup, the charcoal paste guarding your teeth, the sound map in your mind charting every bell and whistle between cottage and church. Survival is an orchestra, and you have learned to conduct each section, fire, earth, air, water, with practiced ease. Midway to the market, you meet old Marta trudging along, basket of goose feathers in hand. She nods approval at the birch twig sticking from your pocket, then reveals her own, a slender rosemary stem, aromatic and naturally antiseptic. Traders might scoff at your primitive brushes, but neither of you wince when biting into crusty rye loaf. Wisdom often hides in plain sight, wrapped in wood smoke and moss instead of parchment. By noon, the village green hums with barter. You trade smoked trout for coarse salt, an essential ingredient for the next batch of tooth powder. The salt merchant eyes your bright grin and asks your secret. You trade a recipe for a pinch of clove buds, eager to experiment with their numbing bite. Knowledge changes hands as freely as goods, carried on breaths cleaned by the very advice exchanged. As shadows lengthen, you turn homeward. A ladle clanging thrice from afar signals all is well. The sonic map guides feet even with the sun at your back. At the cottage, embers you banked at dawn wake with minimal coaxing, proof that every cycle, from maintaining flame to scrubbing teeth, feeds the next. You simmer a pot of beans and slip a handful of charcoal briquettes onto the grate for tomorrow's paste. The day ends as it began. The elements tamed, the body fortified, the mind at ease. Lying on the straw mattress warmed by clay bricks, you run your tongue across polished teeth. No grit, no ache, just the faint aftertaste of mint and smoke. A reminder that protection is never a single act, but a chain of small, deliberate choices. Outside, the hedge rustles. Inside, the hearth glows. And within, charcoal keeps silent watch over every smile yet to come. You finish your tooth-scrubbing ritual and let the fresh mint linger on your tongue as you consider the next challenge: keeping perishable foods cool long after they leave the hearth. Without ice chests or freezing winds, you rely on nature's hidden refrigerators, north-facing stone shelves built into hillside walls. You carve a shallow ledge into the cool, damp rock where temperatures hold steady even beneath summer sun. Jars of milk, bowls of butter, early cheeses, all rest here in the dark, the stone's thermal mass drawing out heat like a patient host. No clattering lids or rattling chains, only the hush of stored coolness beneath your fingertips. Beyond the cottage, you've hollowed a cavity in an old bank of clay and sawdust. The entrance, masked by creeping ivy, opens into a cool chamber lined with fieldstone. Inside, you hang salt-cured meats alongside woven baskets of root vegetables. A trickle of cool groundwater seeps through cracks, condensing on walls and dripping onto straw mats. You mop the puddles with moss to keep humidity in check, then slide a plank across the mouth each dawn. It's a crude cellar, but its consistent 50 DGF keeps perishable yields edible for weeks, an essential bulwark against both spoilage and famine. Your dairy ledger is incomplete without the bog butter you buried months ago. Wrapped in birch bark and sealed with animal fat, churned butter sank into a peat pit where cold, acidic water and lack of oxygen slowed rancidity to a crawl. You remember the morning you checked the stake marking the spot, nervous that months of effort might spoil the yield. But when you pried open the bark, inside was a translucent gold block, firm yet spreadable, its aroma sharp and tangy. A taste confirmed the peat's magic, butter that lasts through winters without a flicker of mold. Grain and legumes get their own hiding places. You split a length of hollowed elderwood, plugged one end, and filled it with barley carefully dried by smoke and sun. The other end you sealed with tallow-greased cloth. Hung from a roof beam, the elder log keeps moisture at bay while warding off mice and insects. When you need flour, you tap the log's side, and grains tumble out like whispers. In a famine, you've even baked emergency loaves from inner bark, mixing powdered linden or elm with scant grain to stretch every kernel. Bark bread tastes bitter, yes, but it can stave off starvation when fields fail. You invest summer afternoons in a spring house by the creek, a low stone hut built over a bubbling cold spring. Its flagstone floor is always slick with leak water, keeping temperatures near freezing. You store jugs of fresh milk, pails of whey, and even delicate custards in shallow wooden trays. The constant drip and cool surround prevent heat from creeping in, so butter stays solid and cheeses age slowly without going rancid. Neighbors barter for your spring house space, an informal co-op of perishables that benefits everyone when midsummer's warmth threatens every harvest. Winter snow is another hidden ally. When the first drifts fall, you clear a low pit behind the cottage, line it with evergreen boughs, and pack in snow and ice. You cover the pile with straw and earth to slow melting, then store wrapped meats and vegetables atop. Even as February's thaw rattles shutters, The insulated pit stays cold enough to keep cabbage crisp and turnips firm. Come spring planting, you uncover the cache and find preserved goodness waiting. Proof that a little labor in cold months secures comfort when green growth is still a promise. Your ceramic vessels play their part too. Fired clay jugs stand on the north shelf, each sporting a porous wall that leaks water just enough to evaporate and chill the contents. You fill them from the spring house each morning and carry them into the fields. By midday, the water inside is refreshingly cool, perfect for wiping sweat or mixing with barley gruel. The same evaporative cooling that thwarts heat in summer earned you compliments at harvest feasts and saved many a traveler from heat stroke on long marches between villages. In tight coordination, these methods form a network of cold storage you navigate as surely as you steer by sound in fog. You juggle barrels of cider in springhouse chill, prune moss off the earthen cellar walls, harvest butter from the bog, and top off the north-facing ledge before the sun climbs. When you send children to fetch cream or eggs, you whisper instructions about which cache to visit. Never the cellar in midday glare, always the shadowed springhouse or the half-buried pit. Mastering these microclimates keeps your pantry resilient, technologically simple, yet brilliantly effective. Come autumn, traders pay handsomely for your springhouse chilled butter and bog-aged cream, turning these preservation feats into a modest income. Peat bogs, stone cellars, spring houses, they become shared landmarks and economic assets, forging bonds across hamlets. Agreements form. You tend the spring house in exchange for trade rights. Another family digs the snow pit each winter for shared use. In lean years, these collaborations mean the difference between lean tables and empty bellies. Food preservation isn't solitary labor, but a social contract written in stone, peat, and snow. As you bank the hearth embers for the night, you survey the larder. Stone shelves bowing under milk jars, wooden kegs lining the cellar's walls, and the hedge's shadow guarding every cool nook. What began as simple ingenuity becomes an ecosystem of refrigeration spun from elements: earth, water, air, and time. You rest easy knowing smoke charred your meat, clay stored your warmth, and now peat, spring, and frost keep your provisions fresh. In this world, before ice boxes and ice wagons, your passive coolers are triumphs of observation and care, ensuring that even the hottest days or coldest nights cannot break your table's bounty. You step into the small antechamber off the kitchen, where hanging bundles of dried herbs still perfume the air with lavender and mugwort. After mastering the art of keeping food fresh, you turn your practice inward, tending the only vessel you truly inhabit, your own skin and senses. If the bog butter, springhouse milk, and cellar vegetables preserved your body's needs, now you will learn to preserve its appearance, health, and spirit through ancient rituals passed down from distant lands. First comes the eye. You reach for your stone mortar, spooning in a pinch of pure galena, shiny black lead sulfide you've ground until it's as fine as talcum powder. Mixed with water from the clay jug, it transforms into a smooth, inky paste that you apply along your lash line with a swan's feather. The cool slick against your eyelids sharpens your gaze and wards off the glare of midday sun. Beyond mere decoration, the kohl acts as a barrier against dust, insects, and eye infections. Practical medicine in a world where every particle in the air could carry disease. As you draw the line outward in an elegant flick, you feel connected to Mesopotamian queens who wore the same substance thousands of miles away, their eyes gleaming like polished onyx in candlelight. Next, you turn to your cheeks and forehead. A handful of clay bloom, a pale powder from riverbank deposits, sits ready in a wooden bowl. Mixed with goat's milk whey and a drop of honey, It becomes a rich mask that tightens pores and draws out impurities. You smooth the mixture across your temples and nose, then retreat behind a curtain of woven rushes to let it rest. After a quarter hour, you rinse under cold spring house water. Your skin feels taut, cleansed of the day's smoke and sweat. The natural clay's minerals supply gentle exfoliation, and the honey's trace enzymes soothe any microabrasions. You admire the subtle radiance that remains, a soft glow earned without lead or mercury's poisons. While the mask dries, you roll a carved jade pebble, warmed by your hearth embers, across your jawline and neck. The smooth green stone is said to channel protective earth spirits. Its cool weight relieves tension and promotes circulation. You learned this from your neighbor's cousin, a traveler who traded stories of Chinese courts where jade rollers were valued as talismans. Now, each morning and evening, you coax lymph and blood through tired muscles, smoothing away puffiness and imprinting a ritualistic calm. The repetitive motion centers your thoughts too, creating a silent meditation that bridges your physical and mental well-being. To nourish deeper layers, you concoct an oil infusion. In a sunlit corner of the antechamber, you have placed jars of olive oil steeping with sprigs of rosemary, lavender, and rose petals. After a fortnight, the oil takes on aromatic warmth. You pour a teaspoon into your palm, rub your hands together, and press the golden liquid into your temples, beneath your eyes, and along your clavicles. The herb-infused fat seals in moisture and delivers antioxidants that strengthen skin resilience. Drop by drop, you learn that preservation need not be confined to food. You can infuse oil with the same intent, extending life to the cells of your face and neck. No beauty routine is complete without scent. You open a small alabaster jar and unveil pastes of crushed frankincense and myrrh, gathered from caravan traders who passed through on their way to distant bazaars. Mixed with softened beeswax, they form a fragrant pomade you rub behind your ears and along your pulse points. As the warm sun of midday coaxes the aroma to bloom, you carry a reminder of sacred rituals and distant deserts with every breath. The resin projection keeps insects at bay too, a natural repellent more subtle than smoke or ash. When evening falls, you draw a warm milk bath in the dug stone tub just beyond the hearth. Into the steaming water, you stir goat milk, honey, and a handful of lavender buds dried above the smoke-curing meat. As you soak, the proteins and fat in the milk lubricate dry skin, and the lavender's essential oils lull you into a gentle reverie. Steam curls around the rafters, carrying the mingled scent of hearth, herb, and honey, comfort you carry from the elements you master daily. You emerge with skin supple and mind cleansed, the night's rituals completing the day's work. Even your nails receive care. You snip and file them with a polished sheep's bone, then buff with a slip of linen until they gleam. A quick brush of tinted clay mixed with crushed beetroot stains the tips a rosy hue, signifying health and vitality to any passerby. It's subtle, earned, and entirely homemade. No imported powders or secrets that cost coin you don't have. You've turned clay from preserving pots into preserving polish, a testament to your ability to coax function and beauty from the same humble material. Finally, you settle before the hearthstone with a drop of balsam rubbed into your lips. The resin from local spruce softens chapping, seals in moisture, and carries a faint, comforting pine fragrance. You trace the line of your mouth and feel gratitude for every small preservation. Fire that holds heat, smoke that preserves meat, clay that shapes vessels, water that cools, and now resin that restores. Each element you've mastered, earth, fire, air, water, joins in a symphony to protect and refine your body as carefully as you tended the village hedge or stored butter in the peat. As the hearth's embers glow low, you glance in the small polished bronze mirror you traded for a jar of valley honey. Your reflection is not an image of yang indulgence, but of a life woven from necessity and artistry. The faint sheen on your cheeks matches the faint patina on your pots. The dark line at your lashes echoes the dark masonry of the cold cellar. The soft glow in your eyes mirrors the living hedge's whispered promise of protection. You gather your herbal poultices and beauty pastes, tucking them into an embroidered pouch that rides with your Ember bundle. Tomorrow, you will set out again, and everything you have learned to preserve – food, shelter, navigation, health, and beauty – will travel with you, a testament that in a world of impermanence, ingenuity can make you whole. You've mastered the art of drawing dark lines around your eyes with galena and coaxing jade to smooth away tension, but word of a new cosmetic obsession sweeps through the courts and manor halls. An alabaster complexion so striking it rivals the moon's pale glow. You see noble women powdered from brow to chin, their skin so white it seems to float above embroidered collars. Behind that ghostly beauty lies a secret blend of ground lead ore, vinegar, and rosewater, lovingly called Venetian Ceruse. You too decide to try it, convinced that a face free of sunspots and freckles signals high birth and endless refinement. In the privacy of your antechamber, you weigh a pinch of ceruse with the precision you once reserved for mixing healing salves. You watch the fine, chalky powder spill into a bowl of sour wine, swirling into a paste thicker than cream. As you brush it across your cheeks, you admire how it catches the candlelight, turning you from a field hand's daughter into someone approaching mythic status. To peers at market or lordly visitors, pale skin whispers that you need never labor under the sun, that your life is one of leisure, worthier of respect, and perhaps even envy. But very quickly, you feel a tightness at your temples. What seems an improvement under lamplight begins to crack and flake by midday. You dampen a cloth in rosewater and ease the fissures, but the next morning, your eyebrows are thinner at the edges, and a silver pinhead of hair falls to the stones. You dismiss it as stress, yet after a fortnight, your scalp itches with unusual fury, and your prized braid shows ragged gaps. This is the hidden price of lead. It seeps through skin, binds with nerves, and slowly betrays you. Still, you cannot resist experimenting with other pigments. A hermit apothecary sells you a lustrous yellow-green paste made from orpiment, arsenic sulfide, promised to brighten dull spots and lend a subtle glow. You apply it in a lace pattern along your cheekbones, feeling as though you've captured a sliver of sunrise. The effect is intoxicating. People pause mid-conversation to stare, as if your face has become a living jewel. But after a day, a fine rash blooms along the jawline, and your throat feels raw when you swallow. You know, at last, that beauty has become poison. Word spreads that high-born friends fall ill, and yet fashion trumps caution. A lady at court flaunts a tinted blush, rumored to hide pallor that drugs the mind and dulls the appetite. You glimpse her across the banquet hall, lips stained crimson by cinnabar, mercury sulfide, and marvel that she eats with such aplomb, untouchable by hunger. You're tempted to buy a vial, but recall how your mother warned that mercury can steal one's health inch by inch. Faced with this dilemma, you draw upon your knowledge of preservation and protection. You remember burying a clay jar of rosehip-infused oil in the cellar to let it mellow in darkness. You repurpose it as a base, hoping its vitamin-rich contents will buffer your skin from toxicity. You mix a drop into each swab of ceruse, reasoning that natural antioxidants might trap some of the metal before it sinks in. It's a frail defense, yet it gives you the courage to persist in courtly cosmetic wars. On gala evenings, you layer your base coat, then overdraw your lips with a mixture of red lead and egg white to craft a cupid's bow that outshines any ribbon in your hair. Beneath the grand chandelier, you feel invincible. Every glance you catch reflects awe. Every compliment affirms your place among nobility. The powder stifles freckles, the blush conceals fatigue, and you become, for a few hours, a living portrait painted by the finest artists. But at home, solitude reminds you of fragility. You sit before your bronze mirror and examine the price of your indulgence. Hair thinning, gums tender at every brush of a quill, a dull ache behind your eyes when dawn's first light strikes your lids. You recall how a Roman beauty centuries ago prized pale skin at equal cost, and how Renaissance alchemists brought arsenic to market as a fashionable cosmetic. You sense the long arc of history bending toward your vanity, and regret that you repeated an old mistake. To protect yourself, you innovate. You craft a protective undermask from spun silk soaked in a decoction of nettle and comfrey, believing its tannins might form a barrier between skin and lead. You press the damp cloth gently before applying ceruse, then let it dry until it peels away cleanly. On paper, it seems to work. Your complexion stays luminous longer, and the worst of the rash is held at bay. Yet you know silk can only filter so much. No barrier is perfect. Every fortnight, you hold a small detox ritual. You sleep with your face painted in a paste of ground chalk and boiled mulberry leaves, believing that mulberry's cooling properties will draw the metals from your pores. In the morning, you wash in springhouse water and follow with a serum of rose petals and honey, hoping that natural acids dissolve residual particles. You feel lighter, your skin less tight, an ephemeral reprieve rather than a cure. In rare moments, you question whether beauty is worth the risk. You wander the gardens at dawn, feeling the dew on your cheeks and realizing that some of the most admired ladies favor a hint of natural blush. Pressed rose leaves kept in a small wooden box. They simply rub a petal's center across cheekbones and then tint their lips with red root. Their approach is gentler, slow-burning candlelight, not blinding glare. Their health endures longer. Their laughter carries more freely. Still, you cannot abandon the brighter palette. Society's ladder requires a face that shimmers. A dowager at court grants you a secret. A clay mask of kaolin and white clay layered over the carouse, intended to draw out impurities overnight. You feel foolish but hopeful, mixing the fine powders with yogurt from your springhouse dairy and patting it onto your skin before bed. You dream of detox, awakening to find cheeks slightly pinker, the flakes of ceruse softened. Perhaps you've found balance after all. One evening, under the soft glow of rushlights, you host a modest gathering of friends. You apply your layers of lead-based base, but then, before guests arrive, you remove half of it with warm cloths and reveal a gentle glow that blends softness with shimmer. Your guests murmur approval. Your complexion is porcelain. Your glow is ethereal. You laugh and pour spiced wine, Senet, trying to ignore the slight ache behind your eyes. As laughter and music fill the room, you realize that beauty, like preservation, is a dialogue with time and risk. Just as you balanced fire to smoke meat without overcooking it, you must balance cosmetic brightness against slow-burning poisons. You wonder whether future generations will trade ceruse for safer pigments, perhaps charcoal and clay, or extracts of iris and poppy. You consider sharing your own herbal undermask recipe, teaching neighbors how to protect their health while still honoring tradition. When you finally retire and remove your layers with careful ritual, oil-based cleansers, herbal masks, spring water rinse, you study an empty bowl of soft, lead-tinted pulp. You reflect on what you've sacrificed for beauty. A few hairs from your crown, perhaps a dab of vitality, certainly a measure of risk. You steady yourself with the knowledge that every choice carries cost, and that wisdom lies in knowing how to mitigate danger without forsaking desire. In the quiet of candles' dying glow, you breathe deeply, feeling the echo of ancient queens and Renaissance courtiers in your bones. You brush a hair from your forehead and make a promise to yourself to continue refining your rituals, to seek gentler alchemy, and to pass on both your secrets and your cautionary tales. For in every powder, potion, and pigment lies the potential for both splendor and harm, and those who learn to navigate that boundary truly master the art of beauty. You step into the great hall after removing your clay and honey face mask, and the warm glow of the hearth welcomes you like an old friend. Across the polished wooden table lie several curiosities: an inlaid board of polished shell and lapis lazuli dotted with ivory pyramids, a row of 16 narrow slots carved into rich teak wood, and a handful of knucklebones bleached white by sun and smoke. These artifacts are more than idle decorations. They are invitations to weave fate, sharpen your wits, and commune with friends beneath flickering torches. Tonight, you will set aside powders and poultices and let your mind be painted by the colors of chance. The first board you lift is the royal game of Ur. Its S-shaped track carved into 4 rows of squares, each marked by a rosette. You remember how the Mesopotamian priests believed the board mirrored the journey of the soul, with safe havens and perilous leaps. As you place your counter, a simple ivory cylinder shaped like a miniature pillar, on the starting square, you whisper a quick prayer to Nabu, the god of wisdom, hoping his blessing will guide your piece. A roll of tetrahedral dice, each face marked by 1 or 2 dots, sends your tokens skittering forward. You feel your heartbeat align with the roll. Luck and skill combine as you navigate the narrow paths toward the goal. Your opponent greets your move with a rueful grin and sets down his own counter in the adjacent column. You both know the rules by heart. Land on an unoccupied rosette and earn an extra throw, but collide with your rival's piece and send it crashing back to start. The game is simple, yet it demands you anticipate not just your progress, but your adversary's next gambit. Moving the pieces feels like guiding travelers through a storm. One misstep, and they tumble into an abyss. Yet every setback is also a chance to learn, to read subtle tells in the other player's eyes, and to turn fortune's wheel once more. After 3 rounds of Ur, you take a breath and turn to the Senet board carved from a single slab of sycamore. Its 30 squares form a straight path, divided into 3 deacons of 10. You slide 30 little sticks, markers painted red on one side, black on the other, into your palm, and cast them like bones. 2 sticks land flat, 2 on edge. You celebrate the rare House of Water square that grants you a leap forward. In ancient Egypt, Senet symbolized safe passage through the Duat, the underworld. Here in your hall, it becomes a shared right. You glance at your neighbor, recalling how they once told you that Senet was first played by pharaohs to secure favor in the afterlife. Now, under your roof, the sacred path carries you toward laughter instead of death's door. Between games, you sip spiced wine and nibble on honeyed figs, feeling the flicker of candlelight on your cheeks, a softer contrast to the stark pigments of your morning beauty rituals. Then you gather the knucklebones, each no bigger than a walnut and carved from sheep's ankle. You shake them in a leather pouch until they clatter like raindrops, then release them onto the table. The bones settle in an unpredictable mosaic, and you call out your score: 2 on their backs, 2 on their heads. You earn the right to play a desperate round of 5 stones, where you must toss and catch the bones in progressively complex sequences. The physical dexterity tingles your fingers and reminds you that sharp minds often reside in nimble hands. As the night deepens, conversations drift between strategy and omen. A lucky roll of the Knucklebones means good harvests for the year. An unexpected capture in Ur hints at forthcoming rivals in the market. You trace glyphs drawn in charcoal at the table's edge, your own shorthand for fortune's patterns, mapping every outcome like a star chart. Between throws, you recount tales of Gilgamesh's dice-throwing companions and of Senet boards found in Pharaoh Tutankhamun's tomb, imagining those ancient players as kindred spirits. In these moments, games become bridges between present and past, mundane and divine. The camaraderie grows as a neighbor raises their voice in mock alarm. Beware the House of 13. They have learned to treat each square and rosette as a character in an unfolding play. You nod sagely, even as your heart flutters at the thought of landing there. Fate enjoys a jest, you reply, nudging your piece forward. Laughter ripples across the group, tightening bonds more effectively than any shared meal. Tonight, alliances form around the board. You promise to support one another's counters, only to double-cross with gleeful abandon seconds later. Strategy and trust intertwine like the ivy climbing your cottage walls. In the hush before midnight, you set aside boards and bones, but the electric tension lingers in the air. You consider how these games have sharpened your ability to read risk, much like tending a clay kiln, preserving meat with wisps of smoke, or discerning the right herbal mix for your poultices. Each turn you took demanded observation, adaptation, and a willingness to accept both triumph and loss. You see now that games are not frivolous diversions. They are rehearsals for life's uncertainties, miniature dramas that teach you to balance caution with audacity. Before you extinguish the candles, you collect the scattered pieces, the slender ivory pillars, the ebony sticks, the polished bones, and tuck them into a carved wooden box. You whisper a final thanks to the unseen forces that guided your hand. Nabu for strategy, Isis for protection, and perhaps a playful coyote spirit for mischief. As you pull the lid closed, the box clicks like a heart stilled. Yet within lies the promise of countless tomorrows defined by fresh rolls, new gambits, and ever-deepening kinship. You step outside into the chilly air, the night sky glittering overhead. The echoes of dice clacks and laughter still resonate in your mind, a reminder that wisdom and mirth often share the same board. You lock the gate against dawn's coming, knowing you will return to these games whenever you seek guidance or camaraderie. For in the curve of a die, the position of a piece, and the unpredictable bounce of a knucklebone, you find a living mirror of fate, one you can shape just enough to keep moving forward. You settle the Ur board into its carved recess and canvass the circle of neighbors for your next contest, a shift from games of chance to contests of cunning and command. You retrieve a square board inlaid with contrasting woods, dark walnut for the grid, pale boxwood for the lines that crisscross into a battlefield of 64 squares. You arrange your legion of small, smooth glass beads, 4 dozen in all, into the classic formation of Latrunculi. This Roman war chess demands you think like a commander, how to lure an enemy piece into a trap, how to defend your flanks, how to sacrifice a pawn to gain ground. Your opponent sets their stones opposite yours in the customary line of whittle. Neither side is symmetrical. Both arrays mirror each other. But the gaps and clusters shift subtly with each play, reflecting different tactical schools of thought passed down from provincial camps. You lift your first piece, moving it 1 square orthogonally. There's no diagonal march here. Roman legions advance in disciplined ranks, not in wild cavalry arcs. Each move threatens to isolate a bead. Surround two sides and you capture it, sending it off the board like a legionnaire called home. As you slide your piece into position, you feel the gravity of that decision. One false advance and a gap opens. One bold push and you tip the balance of force. Opposite you, Silas, the miller's son, sees the trap and hesitates. You give a nod, not in triumph, but in respect. Every capture in Latrunculi is earned by feint or foresight. You recall how Centurion Gaius once described his tactics to you. Make the enemy think you are weak, then strike where they least expect. You try the ruse, feigning a slow advance on Silas's left, only to sweep your bead diagonally. No, wait, you cannot sweep diagonally. Instead, you pivot to the center, where two enemy beads lie adjacent without support. In one swift motion, you slide your piece between them, and the moment the second enemy bead is flanked, both are yours. Silas grimaces, then laughs. Good trick, he admits, resetting his captured beads for the next round. The game revives his respect for subtlety over brute force. When you both pause for a sip of watered wine, you reflect that this board demands the same patience you showed in fire tending or in weaving the living fence. You cannot bulldoze territory. You coax, entice, and outmaneuver. With Latrunculi concluded in your favor, you lay aside the Roman board and unveil a smaller, more austere square of seasoned oak. At its heart sits a carved throne of bone. No mere decorative flourish, but the fulcrum of Hnefatafl, the Viking king's table. Around it, you array 11 defenders in a tight circle and 24 attackers along the edges. Again, the setup is unbalanced. A handful of defenders protect a single king, while a tide of attackers seeks to overwhelm him. This asymmetry reflects Norse values, long odds, fierce loyalty, the hope that precise strategy can repel overwhelming force. You take the defenders, as is custom for the guest of honor, and survey the board. Your king stands proud, ready to break out toward the board's corners, each corner a gateway to victory. The attackers, moved by your opponent, Mamichet, form a ring whose intent is to hem in the king before he can slip away. You breathe in the smoky rafters above, recalling how you smoked trout and ham. Now you must smoke out the enemy with cunning rather than smolder. On your first turn, you free one defender, stepping her 2 squares toward the center, clearing space for your king's future dash. Your opponent encroaches, sliding an attacker up 1 square, aiming to cut off escape routes. The tension builds, and each move feels like a raid on coastal villages. You strike, you retreat, you bait. When the king's path opens, you seize an oar of momentum. You glide the regal piece northward, past the defenders you've nudged aside as living barricades. The attackers react, leaving gaps as they attempt to adjust their cordon. You recognize their error. They have put form over function, perfection in shape over flexibility. With a quiet triumph, you glide the king along the revealed path, 1 square, 2 squares, 3, until he reaches a corner sanctuary. A roar of cheers rings out, startling a barn owl in the eaves. Your victory in Hnefatafl is more than a win. It is a tribute to adaptive strategy, to the power of a single decisive maneuver supported by loyal allies. Later, you discuss variations, whether the king can start on the throne or whether a captain's house grants special moves. Debates flare in good humor. If the king can move diagonally when cornered, what then? Then the saga would never end, someone jokes. Strategies evolve like living traditions, passed between farmers and blacksmiths alike, just as smoke preservation and clay firing methods evolve with each generation. As embers die low, you turn to knucklebone rounds one last time for a quick game of chance. this time to wrap the night in laughter. But your mind drifts back to Latrunculi and Hnefatafl, and how those ancient exercises sharpen not just reflexes, but judgment. You think of the Roman centurion you met, who used Latrunculi games to drill soldiers in small unit tactics, and of the Viking jarl who taught young shield maidens Hnefatafl to hone their defensive instincts before raids. In each board's cut and groove, you see a microcosm of larger conflicts, rehearsals for decisions where lives, livestock, and harvests depend on one well-timed advance. You rise to stow the pieces, beads and bone, boards and dice, in a leather satchel embroidered with your family's crest. Tomorrow, these games will return to the Great Hall. You'll invite migrants and merchants, farmers and smiths, teaching them how these pastimes can anchor mind and community against the uncertainties of weather, war, and politics. Because in a world where embers must be carried, meat must be smoked, and fences grown, the same principles apply to the mind. Surround your threats, protect your core, and never hesitate to retreat or press forward when conditions demand. Locking the satchel, you pat its worn flap and feel gratitude that these ancient contests survive, not as frivolous distractions, but as training grounds for real-world dilemmas. Whether you face a raiding party or a stubborn drought, the lessons from those boards endure: patience, deception, loyalty, and the courage to make daring moves when the moment is right. With that wisdom in your pocket alongside bearers of fire, tooth powder, and clay, you step into the night, ready to face whatever tomorrow's board may bring. You push aside the boards of war tactics and step back into a different realm, one where luck weaves through every twist of fate, and the roll of shells or beans connects you not just to opponents, but to the turning of the cosmos itself. You lift a cross-shaped wooden board laid with 8 arms of colored squares, the ancient pattern of Pachisi, inviting you to race 4 ivory pawns from home to center and back again. Your fingers brush the carved grooves, and you remember how strategy gave you command over enemy legions. Here, chance will guide your steps through life's unpredictable currents. You gather 6 polished cowrie shells, each marked by a natural opening that counts as a blank or a 1. You learned long ago that a throw of 1 shell face up means 1 step forward, 2 up means 2 steps, and so on, up to 6. A throw of all shells opening up grants you a castle, a bonus that sends your pawn to the next junction without fear of capture. Yet that same throw carries the risk of overshooting safe squares, leaving you vulnerable to rivals' lands. You tuck the shells into your palm, let them flutter like captive birds, and release them onto the board. They clatter and spin, each landing face up or face down in a moment that will determine opportunity or setback. As you move your first pawn onto the track, you sense the thrill of competition shifting into reverence. In the royal courts of Mysore, courtiers whispered prayers to Parvati, the goddess of fortune, before each throw. And you too, whisper an invocation to the winds of luck. Your opponents about the low table watch as you advance around one arm, aiming for the central square that marks home. Each time you land on a square already occupied by another pawn, whether yours or theirs, you capture it, sending it back to start. Captures here are celebrated rather than scorned, for they reflect the interplay of fortune and skill. You seized the moment when fortune smiled. Between throws, you reflect on how this game mirrors the pilgrimage of life, circuitous, uncertain, yet threaded with patterns you can learn to anticipate. Safe squares, marked with lotus petals, offer sanctuary. Even if you roll a perfect castle, you cannot occupy a sanctuary twice in a row. That rule reminds you that blessings are meant to be shared, not hoarded. When you do earn a castle, You lift your pawn straight to the next sanctuary, a leap of faith that feels like destiny itself. Yet you also recall how overconfidence can trap you. A castle might speed you past refuge, only to strand you on a rival's path. After several rounds, you push the Pachisi board aside and reach for a flat stone inlaid with red clay lines. A Patolli board, its shape echoing the 4 directions and the calendar cycle of 20 days. You admire the 4 ovals marking start points, each a gateway to the diamond's heart. Instead of cowries, you use 5 black beans with 1 face painted white. The white-faced bean is your power seed, its odds of landing face up roughly 1 in 5. You position your wager, woven baskets of maize, lengths of cloth, or obsidian beads, knowing that every throw stakes something real on the table of fortune. You dip your fingers into the pouch of beans, feel their smooth weight, and cast them onto the clay. 4 beans land painted side up, an auspicious emfokwa that lets you move 4 spaces and grants you the extra privilege of stealing 1 wager from a neighboring player. The table erupts in polite exclamations. "May your harvests be as plentiful," someone toasts, as you gather a small heap of dyed sardine bones in boitment. Patolli is more than entertainment. It is a ritual of reciprocity. Losing a wager means offering help in the fields or sharing a portion of your smoke-dried venison. Winning means accepting a favor that binds you in mutual obligation. As the game unfolds, you see how Patolli weaves cosmology with chance. Each move along the path represents a day in the 20-day month, and reaching the center square, that sacred Itzilistli, is akin to the sun's high point, a moment of triumph before the inevitable descent. If your bean throw lands you precisely on the center, you invoke a moment of ceremony. You rise, sprinkle a pinch of ground maize toward the cardinal point of your choice, and thank the sun for its warmth and guidance. Onlookers bow their heads, acknowledging that the board is a microcosm of the world above. Between rounds, you savor roasted pumpkin seeds and sip honey-mingled water, allowing the social contract of gambling to settle into conversation. You discuss the year's planting plan, the rains you hope for, the allies you will need when harvest arrives. Patolli is never just about silver or turkey feathers. It is a marketplace of promises, an arena where risk is tempered by community ties. You recall the smoking meats that fortified you through lean seasons and realize that every barrel of venison you once shared with neighbors echoes the same principle of give and take on this board. As dusk deepens, you collect your beans and markers, tucking them into leather pouches embroidered with maize motifs. The boards, too, fold away, their grooves and inlays whispering of lands as far away as the Ganges and as distant as the Valley of Mexico. You sense that the shift from strategy games, the strict drill of Latrunculi, and the heroic defense of Hnefatafl, to these chance-driven rituals has a purpose. Here you learn acceptance of what you cannot control, even as you practice skillful handling of what you can. Walking home under a velvet sky, you carry both lessons in your mind. You recall how you once navigated fog by listening for church bells, how you cured meat by coaxing smoke, how you preserved life with clay and peat. Now you realize that life itself is governed by patterns of certainty and randomness, and that your success depends on balancing the two. You need the discipline of strategy when defending your assets, your fields, your family, your hearth, and the surrender to fortune when planting crops, forging alliances, or launching a pawn on a board of chance. Inside your cottage, you relight the hearth, build a slow fire, and lay out your tools for tomorrow's tasks. The Pachisi and Patolli boards rest beside the clay pots and the ember horn, silent reminders that every skill, whether martial, mechanical, or mystical, must bow to time's capricious flow. You trace the board's carved lines with a finger, smiling at the memory of your final throw, and slip it beneath a shelf alongside your strategy games. When tomorrow's sun rises, you will tend fish in smoke, chase water through clay, bank embers, and, if the mood strikes, roll shells or beans to test your hand against the turning wheel of fate. In that circle of fire, earth, and chance, you find not only survival, but the deep joy of living in harmony with both the planned and the unpredictable. You rise from the carved Pachisi board, fingers still tingling from the click of cowrie shells against wood, and find yourself drawn next to a small writing desk tucked into the corner of your great hall. There, a leather-bound journal rests beside an elegantly proportioned quill and a vial of ink as dark as storm clouds. You sense a kinship between the roll of the dice and the flip of fate, and you turn your thoughts to a young woman who gambled everything on her own story. At barely 16, Mary Godwin crossed the threshold of convention by eloping under cover of night with the poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, a scandalous wager that set her on a path as unpredictable as any you've navigated on your boards. You imagine her slipping away from her family's London home, heart pounding like the drum of fate's knucklebones, knowing that each choice would echo through her life like the ring of a well-thrown die. In that moment, her courage matched the boldness of a Pachisi, sea castle, propelling her forward along a course from which there was no return. That whirlwind union carried them across the Alps to Geneva in the summer of 1816, an infamous season forever known as the Year Without a Summer. You picture the couple arriving at Villa Diodati, a lakeside manor choking in mist and chill, while ash from Mount Tambora still drifted overhead. No warmth warmed the gardens. Even caged candles seemed reluctant to stay alight. The gloom might have stolen less daring souls, but for Mary, it set the stage. Forced indoors by driving rain, she gathered nightly with Percy, Lord Byron, Claire Clairmont, and John Polidori to while away the hours. Their entertainment, a contest to invent the darkest tale at a table lit by storm-driven flickers of lightning. You sense the tension echoing the hazard of Patolli wagers. Each guest pitched a story into the gathering shadow, Byron's epic bloodletting, Polidori's early murmurs of vampiric dread. And when it came to Mary's turn, she hesitated. The wind rattled the shutters. In the hush, she told them she was no storyteller. Yet that very admission lured inspiration out of the gloom. She awoke in the middle of that thunderous night, eyes wide, gripped by the vision of a scientist assembling life from the dead. You can almost feel her pulse, racing as though she, too, had rolled 4 white beans face up, a moment of destiny beckoning. By Candlewell, Mary sketched the outline of her creation. Victor Frankenstein, the ambitious seeker who dared to manipulate nature's tapestry. You imagine your own strategic boards dissolved by the power of her imagination, each move she made on the page a gambit aimed at the unknown. Like a master of Hnefatafl, she balanced ambition and caution, flitting between laboratory triumphs and the horror of her creature's first lonely gaze. In her drafts, she wrestled with themes of responsibility, isolation, and what it truly means to be alive. The work poured from her in salons and rented apartments, carried along by the same inexorable force that guides your chips across Pachisi tracks. Yet Mary's life was no gilded fiction. You see her years later, exhausted by grief, 3 infant children lost to fever, a brother drowned in a boating accident, and Percy himself gone, swept away by a freak storm in the Gulf of Spezia. Each grief stacked upon the next like captured pawns on a Latrunculi board, threatening to crush her spirit. But she refused to resign. With perseverance that rivals any strategy game, she edited Percy's poems, negotiated with publishers, and protected his reputation. all while refining her own voice. When Frankenstein finally appeared in print, anonymously, with Percy's name atop the title page, its reception was electric. Critics waxed lyrical about the prose's lyricism, the shock of its moral inquiry, and the vividness of its scientific speculation. You recall how, on your own boards, a bold move can turn the tide. Mary's anonymous gamble paid off. She later revealed herself as author, facing the public's ire that a woman could produce such a dark and intellectual work. But Mary held firm, her conviction as unyielding as the interlaced hawthorn protecting your fields. She pressed through patriarchal doubt, rewriting the narrative that creators must be men. In her later years, you sense the quiet pride she must have felt, like savoring the last bite of your spring house chilled cheese after a long carriage ride. She mentored younger writers, defended Shelley's radical ideals, and oversaw new editions of Frankenstein that cemented her legacy. When asked whether her creation was a warning or a prophecy, she responded with gentle ambiguity, leaving readers to wrestle with the same uncertainties that guided your dice-driven journeys. Each page turned like a Patolli move, unpredictable yet framed by the logic of narrative. Now, as you dip your quill into that glossy black ink, you feel Mary's presence in your own hand. You write of landscapes battered by elemental fury, the same storms that confined her indoors, and of the electric thrill when imagination strikes like a rattling die roll. You chart the interplay of chance and choice, remembering that Mary's inspiration emerged not in clear skies, but amid thunderous doubt. Her creature's fleeting spark of life echoes the ember bundle you carry, small flickers demanding vigilance and care. In the hush before dawn, you pen your final lines. How Mary Shelley harnessed the wild unpredictability of a stormy summer and shaped it into a tale that still haunts us. Her work proved that creativity, like a well-timed gamble, can defy boundaries and redraw maps. You close the journal, heart full of awe at her daring. Outside, the first light of morning grazes your living fence, and you imagine Mary stepping onto a balcony to witness the sunrise after so many dark nights. She embraced uncertainty and, in doing so, taught generations to confront fate with courage. You set quill and ink aside, rising to stoke your hearth. Tomorrow, you will fire your clay oven, weave new stakes into the hedge, and perhaps set Pachisi shells clattering under candlelight. But tonight, you carry Mary Shelley's lesson close, that every bold move, whether on board or in life's pages, shapes worlds unseen. In her gamble, she won a place among the immortals, and like her, you too are a storyteller, crafting survival not only with tools of earth and fire, but with the boundless alchemy of imagination. When the world you built in prose felt irrevocably shattered by loss, you did not let the embers of your creativity die. After the death of your infant daughter Clara, and months later, of your second child William, you returned to your desk with a steadiness born of necessity. Ink flowed from your quill as if guided by a deeper will. You wrote to fill the void that grief had gouged wide, crafting letters that shaped your next novel, Valpurga, a tale of love and power that moved beyond the gothic shadows of Frankenstein. Percy's sudden passing at sea struck you like a gale ripping through hedgerows. His absence left a silence deeper than any fog you'd once navigated by bell and breath. Yet you honored his memory by gathering his scattered poems and essays, organizing them into posthumous volumes for publication. Each edition demanded more than editorial care. You negotiated copyrights, corresponded with publishers across Europe, and ensured his radical verses reached readers hungry for hope amid the political tumult of the 1820s. In the quiet hours before dawn, you paged through Percy's manuscripts by candlelight, annotating lines with your own delicate hand. You reassembled incomplete drafts, supplied missing stanzas, and wrote prefaces that framed his work in the context of your shared ideals. Your voice, once sidelined by anonymity, became the anchor for his legacy. Publishers came to respect your judgment, and critics noted the seamless blend of your insight with his lyricism. This dual creative labor demanded the same patience you'd shown curing meat or firing clay. Gentle coaxing of raw material into lasting form. As if honoring a private vow, you drafted The Last Man, a speculative epic envisioning a world bereft of humanity. Here, you translated personal anguish into sweeping prophecy, a lone survivor wandering a plague-stricken earth. The novel's emotional landscape echoed your own isolation. Each ruin you described was a chapel for your regrets, every farewell a requiem for those you loved. Yet within the despair, you threaded fragile hope, suggesting that even in solitude, the human spirit could endure. Your subsequent works, Lodore, Faulkner, and Perkin Warbeck, revealed unexpected versatility. You moved from medieval politics to intimate family dramas, always probing the balance between individual agency and societal constraint. You infused characters with resilience reminiscent of the living fences you'd once admired, protective yet flexible, rooted yet reaching. Your protagonists learned to weave new paths through adversity, just as you had braided survival techniques into everyday life. Beyond fiction, you chronicled your travels in rambles in Germany and Italy, mapping landscapes that mirrored emotional topographies. You recorded every ruined castle, rolling vineyard, and marble-lined piazza with the precision of a surveyor, but also with the compassion of one who understands exile. Your observations bridged culture and memory. An old Roman aqueduct might recall the slow drip of your tears. A chiseled statue reflect the stoicism you'd forged after Percy's loss. In salons and literary soirees, you held your own among poets and critics. You spoke confidently about the rights of women and the responsibility of writers to challenge injustice. You corresponded with younger feminists, offering counsel on balancing public life and private grief. Your home became a salon where ideas fermented like the sweet mead you once served to threshers, rich, intoxicating, and shared among kindred spirits. When whispers questioned your capacity to edit and produce work after such suffering, you let your growing bibliography answer for you. Each new publication was a testament to your adaptability. Like clay reshaped in the potter's hand, you molded adversity into art. You embraced new literary forms, travel memoir, historical romance, social novel, just as you'd learned to master new survival tools. Your creative toolkit, diverse and well-honed, ensured that no single misfortune could extinguish your voice. Late in life, you oversaw a collected edition of Frankenstein, adding marginalia that revealed your original intentions and clarifying passages Percy had once questioned. You corresponded with foreign translators, ensuring the creature's plight resonated across languages and cultures. You guarded the story's integrity fiercely, as if protecting a secret ember that must not fade. Through your stewardship, Frankenstein evolved from a youthful fever dream into an enduring myth, inspiring generations of readers and writers. Your final decades were quieter, but no less productive. You continued to mentor aspiring authors, exchanging letters that sparkled with insight. You advocated for educational initiatives for women, drawing upon your own journey from precocious adolescent to seasoned novelist. You urged them to study science, philosophy, and literature, fields you believed should not be barred by gender. In doing so, you extended the protective canopy you had woven around your own intellect to shelter countless others. In the annals of literary history, you became known as the Mother of Science Fiction, a title that both pleased and amused you. You saw yourself less as a pioneer of genre and more as a caretaker of ideas, nurturing, editing, and preserving the flame of imagination. Your legacy was not built in a single draft, but in a lifetime of revisions, collaborations, and quiet rebellions against convention. When you finally laid down your pen, your health waning after years of toil, you could look back on a mapped terrain of novels, essays, and letters. Each work was a stone in the fortress you raised against oblivion. Just as you once used clay to store warmth, smoke to ward off spoilage, and sound to guide travelers through fog, you had used words to guard memory, entertain hope, and chart the course between despair and renewal. In the silence after your passing, friends and family planted a yew tree beside your final resting place, a living hedge that would grow strong and protective, bearing witness to seasons of change. Under its branches, readers would one day gather, reciting lines from Frankenstein and The Last Man, honoring both your pioneering vision and your steadfast devotion to art. Your life reminds us that creation is survival. You turned private sorrow into public stories, managed another's work with the care of a seasoned builder, and nurtured future generations like a gardener tending perennials. In every genre you explored, you carried forward the same pioneering spirit that had driven you across storm-tossed lakes and shadowed halls. Your resilience, like a carefully woven living fence, stands firm across centuries, proof that even when fate seems cruel, artistry can forge enduring shelters for the human heart. You settle back into your chair by the dying hearth, the wax of your candle pooling in gentle rings on the stone slab. Your hands are ink-stained from editing the collected works, your mind still humming with echoes of her fierce creativity. You've spent hours tending every line she wrote, nurturing Percy's poems, guiding translations of Frankenstein into languages you'll never speak. And yet the greatest testament to your devotion is not in any volume you shaped. It lives in the generations who have carried her vision forward. You imagine yourself walking through a silent library centuries from now. Tall shelves rise like ancient pillars, each stocked with gleaming spines bearing her name. Mary Shelley. Around you, students and dreamers wander, pausing before her novels as though greeting a beloved elder. They read her words as if they were a lantern's glow, revealing not only the spark that brought her creature to life, but also the warmth of her unbowed spirit. In every classroom, her voice guides spirited debates about science and ethics, and every time someone coins the phrase, "mother of science fiction," you feel her ember pulse anew. Outside that library, modern roads hum with voices that once could only murmur in dim salons. Authors credit her on dust jackets, filmmakers dedicate scenes in rolling credits, and scholars trace entire fields of speculative thought back to her fevered night by Lake Geneva. When scientists design artificial intelligence or engineers draft robotics blueprints, they name-check Frankenstein's ambition and hubris, her prescient questions about creation and responsibility. In lecture halls and labs alike, her work sparks discussions as alive and urgent as when you first turned her pages by candlelight. You smile remembering how you once wove living fences to guard hearth and field. She wove narrative fences to contain the terrors she unleashed on her pages. Yet those fences were permeable, inviting readers inside to confront the darkness alongside her. Now, the genre she founded has grown into a vast frontier. Novels, films, comics, and games tumble from her legacy like oversized blossoms. Yet each new invention carries her DNA. The unsettling question she first wrote in 1818. What gives you the right to create life and then abandon it? That question still reverberates wherever humans play God with technology. At a university symposium you attend, scholars debate the lineage. Jules Verne, and H.G. Wells as her literary heirs, Octavia Butler and Margaret Atwood as her spiritual descendants, Mary Shelley Prize winners crowning new voices who dare to speculate on catastrophe and hope. You walk past their round tables, overhearing a student declare that Shelley's work is the first manifesto of the techno-scientific imagination. They cite your annotated edition, the footnotes you labored over to clarify her first drafts, and you cradle your chest with quiet pride. You were the midwife to her midwifery of ideas, and the world still leans into that birth canal of possibility. Even everyday gestures carry her mark. When journalists warn of runaway AI, they invoke Frankenstein's monster roaming the moors. When environmentalists plead for restraint, they shake their heads at Dr. Frankenstein's hubristic labor. Advertisers sometimes co-opt her image, a gothic visage stenciled on coffee mugs, t-shirts reading, "I want to be your creature." Yet underneath the kitsch, her story reaches new ears, provoking renewed engagement with the ethics she first sketched in a cottage at dusk. You recognize that part of her triumph lies in this ubiquity. She inhabits both high theory and pop culture, an ember glowing in every context. Late one evening, you receive a letter from a young writer in a distant land. They write of reading Frankenstein beneath a toasty lamp, then drafting their first short story, imagining a world where memories could be implanted like spark charges in the mind. They confess, "I never thought a novel from 1818 could speak so directly to my work." You guide their hand in reply, suggesting passages to revisit, offering encouragement as though passing an ember bundle across centuries. You realize that she planted a spark not just in her own era, but in every subsequent generation of curious minds. Back in your cottage, you run your fingers over the binding of her final collected letters, each a testament to her triumph over grief, her diligent stewardship of Percy's legacy, and her unwavering belief that a woman's voice belongs in the public sphere. You light the hearth once more, stacking alder logs that crackle like the first fire you carried in a horn. The living hedge outside sighs with night wind, as sturdy now as her reputation. You feel the parallel. In life, she defended forbidden knowledge. In death, her name defends every writer who dares to dream beyond the boundaries imposed by others. As the embers fade to silver ash, you lean back and close your eyes. In the hush, you hear her laughter mingling with yours, bold, unashamed, a challenge to every generation to carry forward her torch. You promised to protect her spark when you tucked her into clay-backed volumes. Now you know that spark has become an inferno, illuminating worlds she never could have imagined. You rise, ready to tend new fires, perhaps coaching a local scribe on speculative tales, or teaching children to spin charcoal into ink. Every act of preservation, whether in smoke, clay, or story, traces back to her first, courageous step into the unknown. Under the silver light of dawn, you step outside and brush dew from the living fence. You feel her presence in the ribbon of mist, her legacy woven amongst the leaves. The world remembers Mary Shelley not as a footnote, but as a foundational pillar of imagination. In your heart, you carry her as a constant companion, an ember that neither wind nor time can extinguish. And as you build new clay pots, spin new yarns, and guide new sparks into flames, you honor her memory with every breath, knowing that true immortality lies in the lives you and she have forever changed. Thanks for listening to these forgotten medieval survival tips and Mary Shelley's remarkable story. As you drift off, feel free to comment below which technique or tale fascinated you most. Perhaps carrying embers in a horn, curing meat with gentle smoke, crafting clay vessels to store heat, or the Gothic spark that inspired Frankenstein. Sharing your thoughts helps our community grow and settles your mind for sleep. Now get cozy under the covers, close your eyes, and let these historical whispers lull you into a peaceful rest. Wishing you sweet dreams and a good night's sleep. Until next time, sleep well.